All right. Thank you for listening to my talk. This is a talk given at the International Workshop on Fragmented Languages, which took place September 23rd, 2023. This is being hosted by the Western Institute for Endangered Language Documentation, or WEILD, and also James Cook University. My name is Timothy Henry Rodriguez. I'm from Cal State University, Fullerton, and I'm going to be talking about unspecified number in Ventureño Chumash, a new category of number marking. And keep in mind that these are workshops, so these are papers which are in progress. These aren't papers which are finished that we're looking for commentary on. All right. Ventureño Chumash is a language previously spoken in what is present-day Southern California, USA. It's a Chumashan language, and although there has been a break in fluent speakers, it does have a small number of second language learners, primarily heritage learners who are acquiring the language. Ventureño was largely recorded by John Peabody Harrington in the early 20th century, although we do need to note that a native speaker wrote a grammar and lexicon of the language in the 19th century as well. That's a serious contribution because there's grammatical information in there that's not necessarily included in Harrington's notes. Ventureño Chumash has a number marker, which seems to be unattested in the literature. It's used for an unknown number, possibly 1, 2, or more. It seems distinct, though, from the language's singular, dual, and plural marking. And we're going to look at this number marker and its contrast with other number markers in the language, and then sort of focus in on the unspecified number marker and its properties and what makes it unique maybe from things which are similar in other languages. So, for example, we'll look at some languages from Ethiopia later on that compare perhaps to varying degrees with this. The unspecified number marker is this prefix am, and we'll learn more about here. So Ventureño is the language spoken in the southeast of Chumash territory, as you can see here, essentially from what is modern-day Malibu up to close to what is modern-day Carpinteria, and then pretty far inland. You'll see a dialect there called Castaic. That's also a dialect, Ventureño. Ventureño is a central Chumashan language and a southern Chumashan language. This makes it close to languages like Somala, Barbareño, and Frisemeño, and more distantly related to languages like Island Chumash or Cruceño and Obispeño. On the fragmented language scale, which WEILD has developed, Ventureño has a score of B410 with a possible future categorization of A410. Essentially meaning that the language has some publications, it's got a lot of data, has almost no recordings, really just one recording, and there's been, a break in fluent speakers. If a dictionary were officially published on the language, then the language would be moved into the A category. There's one audio recording of the language. It's very short. It's just a word list, and that's it. So nouns themselves on Ventureño have no number marking, and that's important for us to know because number marking can entail a lot of things. So, for example, we have here a sentence at smaktu su'ufku kisiwon lokakai, where the word for chicken, akai, is interpreted as being in the singular. But this is because the subject marking, it makes noise, is in the singular. We can compare this to another sentence, munashuya nasket kisiyiwon lokakai, which means the chickens sing early. Where chicken here, although its form hasn't changed at all, is being interpreted as being in the plural because the subject marking is in the plural on the verb. C-E-E-won, the prefix E-I-Y is the plural marker. Ventureño number nouns can be marked for number, but the number marks possessor of the nouns, what are called pertensive prefixes. So this is the list of Ventureño pertensive prefixes. There are singular forms. Those are the default interpretations of those prefixes if no number marker follows. If a number marker ish is used, that's the dual, E-I-Y or I is the plural. and then is the unspecified number marker for possessor, and we'll see momentarily for subject. So here we have some possessive forms. Mupsuti kumus hesikap. So don't come near my house, where we have a K, which is just my. First person possessor. It is the land of us two. Our two land, ish, meaning the dual marker, and ki umu, the food of us three or more. Where E is the plural marker for possessor. Personal pronouns also mark a distinction in dual and plural number, although this is only in the first and second person. In the third person, there's distinctions in proximity, but there's no distinction between the singular. Number marking on verbs can be conveyed several ways. Pluractionality, for example, can be marked through reduplication, although that seems sort of incidental. Usually the aspect of the reduplication seems to be more important. Pluractionality just ends up being just encoded by accident or incidentally, I guess. There is an associative prefix which is used on verbs, which typically have an accompanying part or participant, and then there are subject and object marking. We're going to focus here, for the sake of time, on subject marking on verbs, because that's where really shines, the unspecified number marker. Objects don't mark unspecified number, and objects also don't mark things like dual versus plural. So. Here are the subject prefixes in Ventureño. They're identical to the possessive, they're identical to the pertensive prefixes, but they mark instead number of possessor when put on verb. So dual, plural, singular, and then unspecified number in the third person, an additional fourth human verb. Again, singular is interpreted by dual fault. There we've got our ish plural, ish dual, e plural, unspecified. The unspecified number is markers used in situations where the number of subjects is unknown. And it's typically translated into English, when it's translated into English or Spanish, for that matter, as they or the general you. But in context, the reference to likely number actually seems to vary. So, for example, we have situations like this. This is an act. They bend a board in order to make a sewn plank tomoch, which is a seagoing canoe. This is an action which might actually require several people, and this here could possibly, depending on the context, could possibly be more than one, maybe even more than two people. Likely, perhaps even more than two people. Here we have a situation where there's a task which typically involves several men. We have any number of men sitting in a sewn plank canoe. So minimally, some of the crew would be involved. This is if they spear a whale of the tail, that's definitely more than one person engaging in that activity, but still you don't know who the person is and you don't know who the number of people are. When you spear a whale in the tail, it is incapacitated, but more literally, when there is a spearing of whale in the tail, it is incapacitated. So I think 12 men to a canoe, I think is a maximum number. It's possible to have fewer individuals in the canoe. I'm just repulsing that number cited somewhere. In other situations, the reference is likely one or two people. So here we have a task, the plugging of holes in abalone in order to make the abalone sealed, so it can be used to hold something. Zamsutikip lo iswaf auf zamsunus seal zamsunus zamsunus seal. The holes of the abalone are plugged with tar, but more literally, this means they have plugged its holes and they have used tar. But they, again, being an unspecified number of people, more likely to be two or one person. This is really a task that requires a group of individuals. In the situation below, it's almost certain one person or maybe just a couple people knocking, but the speaker can't be certain who the someone is. The So someone is knocking at the door. Can also be used with nominalized verbs. So here we have attached to the nominalized verb for that which causes death. And the practical translation of this sentence here, lo ishtabakas salam naksha, is at the roots of its teeth it has poisons. But the literal translation is something more like at its roots of its teeth. That's implied. There is that which causes one to die. And that which causes one to die has the unspecified marker on it. So, because the number is unknown. It's interesting there, though, because we typically would interpret poison as a mass noun as opposed to a count noun. So the number marker seems to be unique and perhaps even an unattested form of number marking. First, Ventureño is not like a language such as English, Gothic, or Basin, with merely a singular, dual, trial, pockle, or plural systems. It's got more going on. The unspecified number is distinct from plurals and is distinct from elements that may be both singular and plural as well. So here are some systems in the world which seem to compare, they seem to be the closest comparison to Ventureño. And we'll see how they do compare and then how they don't compare. So the first is a Tucanoan language from Brazil and Colombia. And it has morphosyntactic distinctions of singular versus plural on count nouns. However, mass nouns are treated differently in that they have no distinct plural. I'm not necessarily really surprised there. The bare root identifies not a singular, but an uncountable referent. This, however, is distinct from Ventureño in that the Ventureño unspecified is overtly marked. It is overtly marked. And it's also used with count nouns. In fact, seems like a lot of the examples we have with it, it's being used with nouns which can be counted, like people, for example. Here we have Baiso, a Cushitic language of Ethiopia. It has words similar to this Tucanoan language in having an unmarked general, or what's called a transnumeral form. This would be the last form here, Luban, lions. So we have words which mean a or the particular lion, a word which means a few lions is the number marking for lions just in general. But then there's a form which is for just lion and lions in general. Again, though, this is different from Ventureño in that this language has no morphological form dedicated to general number marking, whereas Ventureño, if the in Ventureño is general or transnumeral, it's a specific dedicated form. Finally, we have a language, a nomadic language of Ethiopia here. And in this language, there is a general or transnumeral form that does stand outside the number system, according to the author here, where we have a singular, a particular plural, a global plural, which can all be marked. So, for example, we have the word for goats, a singular form for masculine and feminine, and those masculine and feminine forms have very specific, they can entail very specific semantics in addition to simple gender. There's a particular plural, the goats, and then a global plural, all goats. This transnumeral, though, again, is not very comparable to and Ventureño for reasons already stated. Its global plural, though, actually does perhaps warrant a closer comparison, however, especially given that for example, is compatible with number marking for all. So we have a sentence here. It was all the priests who taught the people their trades, so a little translation. And we have the word all here. Their seeming overlap between the languages' number marking is superficial, I believe, however. When the precise number of reference, for example, is known in Ventureño, the dual singular or plural seems to be invoked quite readily. Also, the unspecified does seem to be frequently used for non-referential entities in Ventureño. I'm not entirely sure that's true for this language here, but perhaps so. Also, the global plural is also definitely plural, but not so for is not for sure plural. There are situations where it seems to be probably one or two people. Does allow, for example, a singular or dual interpretation. The unspecified number in Ventureño also seems different from Hamer, but new data maybe will shed light on this. My conclusions are that the unspecified number of Ventureño may present a distinct unattested number category. Interpretation and context can be singular, dual, or more. It is distinct marking separate from the plural. It does not involve default or zero marking. It is used with unspecified entities, also frequently with non-referential entities, but not always. Someone knocking at the door, that's going to be an individual, a real referential individual. But perhaps there are sort of shades to the referentiality here that the language is sensitive to or not sensitive to. One thing I definitely want to look at based on the talk that I gave is I want to look at situations to see if I can find any situations where overt subjects are used with verbs that are marked with none of the examples presented here have them, and they seems to be pretty rare just with sort of a cursory going over the data, but I want to look at that more distinctly. Ventureño does typically not list the subject. The subject is typically not given its own noun phrase. But enough sentences do have a noun phrase with the subject that you would expect it, at least in some cases, if it were behaving like the other number markers. I really do need more and better typological data on the languages, either the ones I've looked at here or other languages, and I definitely welcome comments to the same. Apologies for any language or author where I may or may not have pronounced the name quite accurately. I did try to hunt down accurate pronunciations everywhere I could, but sometimes came up dry. I am very grateful to all the authors who compiled and provided the data that I used here to compare with Ventureño. All right, thank you very much. This ends the presentation.